2 Samuel chapter 2 is after the Saul and his 3 sons had been defeated, and Israel is just in disarray, and David now is free to become king. So he went to Hebron, which is in the very southern tip of the nation of Israel, and that was the area where Judah was. That was the tribe that David was from. So he went basically to friends, to people he knew, and he presented himself as their king, and they accepted him. But Abner, who was the general of Saul, the king that was before David, he went and took Ishbosheth, who was one of the sons of Saul, and he made him king over the northern tribes of Israel. Now, we don't know all of the reasons for this. It's possible that Ishbosheth, because he was a son of Saul, was kept in reserve in case Saul and his sons died, and he would be like, kept in the wings so that if something died, he could take over the kingdom. It may have just been a practical matter, and that's the way that Saul wanted it to be. I also pointed this out, that in the 26th chapter of 1 Samuel, David had totally humiliated Abner and said that he was worthy of death because David slipped in to the camp of the Israelites and took Saul's cruse of water and his spear that was at his head while everybody else was asleep. And then he came back and he yelled to Abner and he says, "You didn't protect the king. You're worthy to be killed." And he basically just humiliated him. I mean, rubbed his nose in it in front of all of these people. And it could be that that's why Abner didn't help make David be king, because it was obvious. Everybody knew that David was the one that was anointed by Samuel to be king. And so we don't know all of the reasons for it, but I'm sure that there was no love lost between Abner and David over the things that happened there in 1 Samuel chapter 26. But for whatever reason, Abner took Ishbosheth and took him up to Mahanaim, which is where Jacob had seen these 2 camps, seen the angels. This is where he wrestled with the angels, and this was up north and east of the Jordan River. It was quite a ways away from where David was down in Hebron. But in the latter part of this 2nd chapter, it shows that Abner came down into David's territory, and Joab, who was a cousin of David, but also the general over his forces, Joab and Abner were on opposite sides of this pool, and they had 12 of their men, 12 from each camp, come out and fight a battle to the death. And David's men, they were all killed, all 12. So that means 24 men, 12 on each side. They fought until they each killed each other. So there was 12 of David's men that died, 12 of Abner's men that died in this thing. And then the battle just progressed so that the Israelites David's tribe of Israel, Judah, overcame the northern Israelites and drove them away. And anyway, this is a little tedious. Some people think, what does this mean to anything? It does mean something, because later on this Abner, who was the general over Saul's army, and then later took his son Ishbosheth and put him to be the king, Abner killed Joab, the general of David's brother. And because of that, he even begged, Abishai was his name, and he begged him to turn aside and not come, because he said, "I won't be able to hold up my face to your brother Joab if I kill you." But anyway, the guy would not relent, and so Joab wound up killing him, and because of that, there was hatred. And you find in the 3rd chapter that after a period of years, David reigned for 7.5 years just over that southern tribe of Judah. He didn't reign over all of Israel. So there's another lesson right here to learn, and that is that God's the one who anointed him. God's the one who prophesied that he would rule over the entire nation of Israel. And did you know it didn't come to pass all at one time? It came to pass in steps and stages. And see, there's a lesson for us to learn here, because there's some people that have a vision of what God wants to accomplish in their life, and if they don't just get it all done at one time, they get frustrated. I know that I had to deal with this, because the Lord showed me that He wanted me to be reaching people all around the world. I had a worldwide vision from day one when God changed my life. And yet I went 20-something years of people staying away from my meetings and from my churches by the droves. They stayed away by the thousands. And it was frustrating because I knew that God had called me to do something more than just reach a very few people, and yet it wasn't happening. And I tell you, if people don't understand that there are steps and stages, if you don't look at David and learn from him and learn that he became king, but it was 7.5 years that he ruled over just one of the tribes before he was able to rule over the entire nation. See, you learn a lesson from that not everything that God plans for you just comes to pass all at one time. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it says, "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." That right there shows you there are stages: good, acceptable, and then the perfect will of God. In Mark chapter 4, I think it's verse 28, it says that the earth brings forth of herself first the blade, then the ear, then the full corn in the ear. And that's talking about how the Word of God, like a seed, works in our life. And so the Scriptures teach that there is growth. You don't just step into everything that God has for you all at one time. So even though some of these things that we're talking about right here are a little bit detailed, and some people may think, why are you teaching this? Let's go on to something else. There's a lesson here. I'm talking about lessons that you can learn from David's life, lessons from David. And one of the reasons that people get frustrated is because they don't study the Word and they just look at the highlights and they miss these details. It's important for you to recognize that for 7.5 years, David was frustrated. He was king, but he was king over just 1/12 of the nation. And he could have gotten frustrated and said, this isn't what I thought. This isn't what you promised me. And he could have quit along the way. God is speaking to some people right now that you're headed in the direction that God has given you, but it's not coming as fast and as easy as you thought it would. And your temptation is just to say, well, God, I don't like this. This isn't the way I thought it was going to be. And you're thinking about giving up, quitting, going another way, or trying to get in and help God like Abraham did. And you're going to produce an Ishmael if you do that. If you produce an Ishmael, you're going to have to feed him. I tell you, this is a word from the Lord for some people right here. You need to pay attention to this. That David for 7.5 years was frustrated. But finally, in the next chapter, you find that Ishbosheth, which was the son of Saul, the apparent heir, he was the king over the northern tribes of Israel, but he was only king because Abner, the general, had thrown his weight behind him. And Ishbosheth accused Abner of committing adultery with one of Ishbosheth's wives. And the scripture doesn't say if he did or didn't do it. We don't know for sure. Abner was not the most upstanding person. It's not that that is inconsistent with something he would have done. But nonetheless, when Ishbosheth came out and accused Abner of committing adultery with one of his wives, Abner just got furious, like, you ungrateful thing, you wouldn't be king if it wasn't for me. And so Abner decided that he would take these northern tribes and bring them all to David and make David king. So in the 3rd chapter, you find that Abner came down to meet with David. David received him, and Abner promised that he was going to bring the northern tribes back to David and make David king over the entire nation. So David let him go with this promise that he was going to unite the kingdom under the rule of David. And Joab, David's general, Joab, who was the brother of the man that Abner had killed in this battle here in the 2nd chapter of 2 Samuel, when Joab found that Abner had been released and set free to go back home without imprisoning him or doing anything to him, he got mad at David and criticized David. And so he sent a note after Abner in the name of David and said, come back, we want to inquire something else. And so when Abner came back, Joab acted like he was going to hug him, but instead he had a knife hidden under his clothes, and he took this knife and killed Abner. And when this happened, boy, David got mad, and Boy, here's some other lessons. There are just so many things right here. I know that not everybody's interested in these details, and it doesn't matter to you. And I'm not meaning to be critical, but most people just don't study the Word and they don't learn from it, and because of it, they make all of these mistakes. If you would listen to what I'm saying, if you'd listen to what the Scriptures are saying, man, this would teach you some things. It would save you a lot of struggle, a lot of hurt and pain.
Andrew will be right back after these messages.
If you've been encouraged by the teaching ministry of Andrew Wommack, we invite you to explore the teachings of 𝗂𝗶𝗵𝗵𝗵 on YouTube. 𝗂𝗵𝗵𝗵 brings clarity, depth, and real-life application to the Word of God. With hundreds of messages that reveal foundational truths, her teachings are designed to help you understand and embrace the fundamental pillars of relationship, identity, and the love of God. Watch Life Foundations with 𝗂𝗶𝗵𝗵𝗵 on YouTube today.
And now, here's Andrew.
And so anyway, Joab, David's general, killed Abner, the general of Ishbosheth, over the northern kingdoms, and David was furious with him and criticized him, but he didn't replace Joab, which is a major mistake. And this happened over and over and over again. Joab also killed one of David's sons, Absalom, who rebelled against him. And Joab went directly against the king's command. David said, "Be merciful unto Absalom." And instead, Absalom was caught in a tree by the hair that was on his head. He had real long hair, and he got caught in a tree. And he could have cut him down and have brought him to his father David and have preserved his life the way that David told him to do. But instead, he thrust 3 darts through his heart and killed him on purpose in total rebellion towards David. So he killed his own son. And then Abner did a bunch of other things. I could go on and mention this. But David knew it was wrong. He even replaced Joab one time by another general and made another person general, and Joab killed him. And so David was displeased with Joab, and yet he left him in the position of leadership because he was an excellent soldier. The soldiers, the army rallied behind him. He was a very dominant personality. And one of the things to learn from David is that this caused him nothing but grief. And did you know, as we get into the end of 2 Samuel and then go into the first few chapters of 1 Kings, David on his deathbed told Solomon, his son, who would become the king after him, and he told Solomon, he says, "Don't let Joab die a natural death. You bring down his life with blood," which is just the King James way of saying you kill him. Make sure that he doesn't die a natural death. I think that's terrible. That David knew it was wrong. He wanted to kill Joab. He wanted to get rid of him. But he was either intimidated by Joab, or maybe Joab had something on him, because Joab was complicit in the death of Uriah, the husband of Bathsheba, and it's possible that Joab knew some details and he, in a sense, was blackmailing David. At this time that we're talking about right here in 2 Samuel chapter 2 and chapter 3, that hadn't happened yet, and yet David was already allowing Joab, a man who caused him much, much grief, to do him wrong, and he would not replace him. So whatever his reason was for that, it was wrong. And did you know this is one of the lessons that I've learned from David? I had a situation in my ministry where a man who worked for me, and he had been a great friend. We had traveled the world together. We'd done a lot of things together, and he blessed us, and he did a lot of great things for this ministry. I do not dislike this guy at all. He's now gone on to be with the Lord, and I know I'll see him in heaven, and I loved him and appreciated the good things that he did. But the guy was brutal on some of my employees. And I mean, I could look behind me and just see the bodies of people that this man left behind. And it's not the way I would have done things. And yet he was helping me so much. And he did so many good things for the ministry. I just thought, I can't do without him. And I saw that he was hurting people, and he had set his sights on a couple of people who were friends of mine in the ministry. And I knew that he was going to He was going to give them a hard time until they just quit. He wouldn't just fire you. He would make your life so miserable you'd have to quit. And I saw this. I knew it was wrong, but I thought, God, how can I do without him? He is just so indispensable. He's a businessman. He's doing things that I can't do. And I struggled with this for 2 years after I knew that this man was supposed to be gone from our ministry. But I just kept thinking I can't do without him. And you know what? I was studying these exact things that I'm talking to you about right here. This is one of the lessons that I learned. This is not something about somebody 3,500 years ago. This is something that God was speaking to me. And I took this and I said, Father, I'm just like David. This man has done a lot of good. He's helped me. He's indispensable in certain ways, but he's also causing me grief. And he's doing things that are hurting people, and I know this isn't the way you would want to treat them. It's not the way you want me to treat them, and I'm ultimately responsible for letting this man treat them that way. And I struggled over this for 2 years, and it was a thorn in my flesh. And finally, through studying these scriptures, I saw that, God, I'm doing the same thing that David did with Joab. I need to do what's right regardless. But I said, how do I do it without this person? I said, I don't know how to make it without them. I need what they are providing. And you know, the Lord spoke to me and he said, nobody is irreplaceable, not even you. And he says, if you don't do what's right and if you don't run your ministry the way it's supposed to be, he says, I'll get somebody else who will do it. And you know what? That was the impetus to get me to finally say no to this man. And I went in and it was a shock to him and it caused strife between us. We left shaking hands and hugging each other, and outwardly it was good, but it was bad. It was not the way it was intended to be. And I'm not saying I did everything perfectly, but did you know, looking back, that was one of the best decisions I ever made. The ministry, it was like it was growing, but it had a bottleneck. This one man, the style of management that he had, it was restricting the growth of the ministry. And when I let him go, the ministry just exploded. And I mean, we have increased multiple times since then. And you know where I learned that? I didn't learn it through somebody else. It wasn't somebody else that came and told me these things. It was these scriptures right here about how Joab did things, and David, for whatever his motivation was, he would not let go of Joab. And he knew that Joab was wrong because at his deathbed, he told his son to make sure you kill this man. David didn't have the guts or the strength or the wisdom or whatever you call it to do what was right, but he told his son, you do what's right. I think that's terrible that you push something like this over on your son and make him carry out what you knew you were supposed to do. And I just determined I wasn't going to do that. And man, looking back, that was one of the best decisions I ever made. It was hard. Firing a person, especially somebody who had been with me over a decade and was a super good friend of mine, somebody that I really loved, and we had had great fellowship together. And yet I had to do it. And so this is not just reading about what happened 3,500 years ago. This is not just you listening to me talk about what I've been through. If you're paying attention, the Lord could speak this to you. There are some of you that are in a position that you know that there is somebody, maybe it's not an employee, it might just be a friend or something, and maybe you've had some great times together, but right now it's toxic. It's not good. And yet you won't do what you need to do. This isn't saying that you should be mean towards anybody. It isn't saying that you should act un-Christ-like towards anybody. But there is a place to fire people. There is a place to withdraw from a relationship because it's not helping you. It's hurting you. Maybe it's hurting other people that are around you. Maybe somebody in your family is being hurt by a relationship that you've got. See, these things that I'm saying about David, this is why I just love this teaching. Because if you pray about it and let the Lord show you, this is stuff that applies to us right now. This isn't just thousands of years ago. God hasn't changed. He's the same yesterday, today, forever. People haven't changed. People still have all these ulterior motives and they're still making the same mistakes. And I tell you, through me studying David, I learned something that made a dramatic difference in my ministry. At that time that I had to let this man go, did you know our ministry was around 300 employees? Now we have about 1,200 employees worldwide. We have increased 4 times. This happened in 2014, I think is when it happened. So at the time I'm making this program, that's 12 years later, we've increased 4 times over, not only in staff, but in income, in outreach, just on and on. And I am convinced that if I hadn't have done this, it was hard for me to do to somebody that I loved and was a friend of mine, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And I gained strength because I saw how David, this was one of the major problems. It cost him one of his sons. This Joab killed his son eventually. And this Joab caused all kinds of problems and eventually wound up joining with another son of David who rebelled in him and tried to have a civil war and overthrow David. And that was thwarted and David survived. But Joab did him a lot of damage. He knew it was wrong, and yet he wouldn't do the right thing because he felt like Joab's benefit to him was greater than the negatives associated with him. I tell you, this is one of the lessons I learned from David that has made a huge, huge difference in my life. And again, I know that every person watching this, you can relate to this if you would open up your heart. That there are people, whether it's an employer-employee situation or if it's just friends, if it's associates, there are some times that people are just toxic. And maybe they do supply something. Maybe you've known them a long time. It could even be family. I've seen some people that just allowed family members to ruin their lives because they just thought, I can't separate from them. Sometimes it's better. You are enabling people when you just continue to support them even when you know they're wrong. I'm out of time today, but I've got this book entitled Lessons from David. I'm making this available to you free of charge if you need it. I'm not discouraging you from giving. I encourage you to give. We'll put out tens of thousands of these, but I want you to have this. And I not only have this 200-plus page book, but I also have CDs, DVDs, a USB, and a study guide. And if you'll listen, our announcer will give you the information about how you can get these materials today.